He rented a cabin for peace, but the Apache woman inside changed his fate forever. John Matthews had never felt so exhausted in his life. The city had drained him completely. Every day felt the same: alarm clocks, traffic jams, endless meetings, and the constant pressure to perform. Even the small comforts, like a coffee on the corner or a walk in the park, no longer brought him joy. He had tried everything to find relief: weekend trips, meditation apps, talking to friends, but nothing seemed to help. The stress, the disappointment, and the constant noise of life had built up inside him like a storm waiting to break. It was on one particularly gray morning, as the rain tapped relentlessly against his apartment window, that John finally made a decision. He couldn't live like this anymore. He needed to escape, not just for a weekend, but for a long time, a period where no one could reach him, where he could think, breathe, and remember what it felt like to be calm. After searching online for days, he found it: a small cabin in the mountains, far away from the city, surrounded by dense forests and winding streams. The pictures showed a wooden cabin, rustic but well kept, with smoke curling from its chimney and a view that stretched for miles. The idea of being there alone made his heart beat faster, not with excitement but with relief. John packed quickly, stuffing only what was necessary into a worn duffel bag: clothes, some books, his journal, and a few essentials. He left behind the gadgets and reminders of the life he wanted to forget, including his phone, though he couldn't resist keeping it for emergencies. As he drove away from the city, he watched the skyscrapers disappear behind him. The noise, the lights, the endless crowds, they all faded into memory. For the first time in years, the silence was almost overwhelming, but it felt good. It was the silence of possibility, a chance to reset. The drive to the cabin was longer than he expected. Winding mountain roads, steep turns, and thick forests on either side created a feeling of being completely cut off from the world. Occasionally, he saw other cars or hikers, but most of the time it was just him and the road. He stopped once to stretch, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. The scent of pine and wet earth filled his lungs. He closed his eyes and for a moment felt a strange sense of peace, something he hadn't felt in a long time. When John finally reached the cabin, it was late afternoon. The sun was low, casting golden light through the trees. The cabin looked even more beautiful in person than in the photos. Its wooden walls seemed warm and welcoming, the small porch inviting him to sit and simply watch the forest. He parked his car nearby and stepped out, feeling the cool breeze brush against his face. There was an almost magical quality to the place, as if time moved slower here. For the first time in months, he smiled without thinking about work, deadlines, or disappointments. He unlocked the cabin and stepped inside. The interior smelled faintly of wood and smoke, comforting and familiar. The furniture was simple but functional: an old wooden table, a few chairs, a small bed neatly made with blankets, and a stone fireplace that looked like it had been there for decades. John walked around slowly, touching the furniture, opening the windows, letting the natural light fill the rooms. He felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. Being completely alone was both freeing and frightening. What if the silence became too loud? What if he faced thoughts he had been avoiding for years? As he unpacked his bag, he heard something unusual: a soft rustle outside, near the edge of the forest. He paused, holding his breath, and listened carefully. Another rustle, then a snapping sound, like a branch breaking. His heart raced, but he told himself it was probably an animal. The area was remote after all, and wildlife was to be expected. He tried to focus on the positive. This was exactly the kind of adventure he had wanted, the kind of place where he could reconnect with himself and nature. That night, John lit a fire in the fireplace. The flames crackled and danced, casting shadows on the walls. He made a simple dinner: canned soup and some bread, and ate quietly, enjoying the solitude. Afterward, he sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. There were so many stars here, more than he had ever seen in the city. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of light, and for the first time in years, John felt truly small, yet connected to something bigger. He took out his journal and began to write. At first it was just mundane observations, the drive, the cabin, the weather. But soon he started writing about his feelings, about the emptiness he had been carrying, and the relief of finally being away from it all. As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest grew louder, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, and the distant call of an owl. John felt a strange sense that he was being watched, though he couldn't see anyone. The feeling was not threatening, but curious, almost like the forest itself was aware of him. He shook off the unease and reminded himself that he had come here for peace. Tomorrow, he would explore the trails, walk by the streams, and let nature teach him how to be still. He drifted off to sleep, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation for what the days ahead would bring. The next morning, John woke to the sound of birds singing outside his window. The sun had risen, spilling golden light across the cabin floor. He stepped outside and took a deep breath. The forest was alive with energy. Leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and somewhere in the distance a deer moved gracefully through the undergrowth. He felt a thrill of joy that he hadn't felt in years. For a moment he stood still, closing his eyes and listening, allowing himself to simply exist without any demands or pressures.
While exploring the area around the cabin, he noticed strange footprints in the soft soil near the edge of the forest.
They were human, but he was certain he was alone. Curiosity mixed with a little fear, and he followed them for a short distance, but they disappeared into the trees. Probably someone else who lives nearby, he muttered to himself, though no houses were visible from where he stood. He shrugged and continued walking, trying to focus on the beauty around him, the bright green ferns, the sparkling creek, and the sunlight filtering through the canopy. By evening, John returned to the cabin exhausted but happy. The peace he had longed for was finally beginning to take root. He lit the fireplace again, brewed some tea, and sat in the quiet, feeling a sense of accomplishment. He realized that even though he had sought this solitude to escape life, it was teaching him something deeper, how to slow down, how to notice the small details, and how to be present. He didn't know what the coming days would bring, but he felt ready to face them one step at a time. As he lay in bed that night, John reflected on his journey so far. The forest had already begun to change him, even in a single day. He felt more aware, more alive, and more peaceful than he had in years. Yet there was still a sense of anticipation, as if something or someone was waiting for him here in the mountains. He couldn't quite explain it, but the feeling lingered as he drifted off to sleep, a mixture of wonder and curiosity filling his dreams. And so John's escape had begun, not just from the city or his stress, but from the life he had carried on his shoulders for too long. The cabin, the forest, and the quiet all promised a new beginning. Little did he know that his quest for peace would soon take an unexpected turn, introducing him to someone who would change the course of his life forever. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the tall trees, casting dancing patterns on the forest floor. John Matthews woke early, as he had done each day since arriving at the cabin, but today something felt different. The air seemed heavier with anticipation, or maybe it was just his own curiosity. He stretched, rubbed the sleep from his eyes, and stepped outside onto the small wooden porch. The forest was alive with sound, the chirping of birds, the soft rustle of leaves, and somewhere in the distance, the faint splash of water from the creek. It was a peaceful symphony, yet beneath it lingered an unfamiliar tension, as though the woods themselves were hiding a secret. John decided to explore further than he had the previous day. He had walked along the familiar trail behind the cabin, past the creek and into the clusters of ferns, but today he wanted to venture deeper. He packed a small bag with water, a notebook, and some snacks, feeling a sense of excitement he hadn't known in years. As he stepped off the porch, the forest seemed to welcome him, the sunlight warm on his face. He followed a narrow path that twisted and turned, guided only by the natural flow of the land. After walking for some time, John noticed something unusual. A figure was moving among the trees, a woman, though he could only see her silhouette at first. She was crouched near the roots of a large oak, carefully examining something on the ground. He froze, unsure if he should call out or retreat. Then she looked up, and their eyes met. The woman was striking. Her dark hair framed a face both strong and gentle, her skin touched by the sun, her eyes sharp yet kind. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew the forest intimately, and her presence seemed to belong there as naturally as the trees themselves. John felt a strange mix of awe and caution. He had expected solitude, not a meeting like this. "Hello," he said finally, his voice slightly shaky. The woman smiled, a gentle but knowing smile, and inclined her head in greeting. "You must be John," she said in a calm voice. "I've seen you around the cabin." "I am Ayanna. I live here, or rather, I take care of this land." John blinked, surprised. "Take care of it?" he asked. "I thought the cabin was private. I didn't expect anyone else to be here. The cabin is yours to stay in, but the forest belongs to everyone, and it belongs most to those who remember how to respect it. I help protect it." John nodded slowly. There was something about her presence, something peaceful yet commanding, that made him feel both welcomed and observed at the same time. I didn't mean to intrude," he said. "I was just trying to find some peace." "You are not intruding," Ayanna replied, her tone warm. "Peace is something everyone comes seeking. The forest has a way of giving it to those who are willing to learn." She gestured to the area around them. "Walk with me. I can show you a few things." Though hesitant, John followed. The forest seemed different when she moved through it. Her steps were quiet but purposeful, and she pointed out plants, small tracks in the soil, and subtle changes in the terrain that John would have never noticed.
"This plant is called yarrow," she explained.
"It can be used for healing. And these tracks, see the patterns? Deer passed here last night." John tried to focus, but he couldn't help noticing her face, the way her eyes seemed to see through the forest and into his thoughts at the same time. There was a calm confidence about her, an understanding of life that John had long forgotten. "You've spent a lot of time here," he said. Ayanna nodded. "My family has lived near these mountains for generations. We learned from the land, not just about survival, but about respect and balance. The trees, the streams, the animals, they all have lessons if you know how to look." As they walked, John felt a strange mix of curiosity and comfort. His city life had taught him rules, schedules, and deadlines, but this forest, this woman, this quiet, felt like a different kind of education, one that did not judge, but revealed. He listened closely as she spoke of the ways of the forest, the cycles of the seasons, and the history written into the land itself. At one point, they reached a small clearing where sunlight poured down like a spotlight. Ayanna knelt beside a cluster of wildflowers and carefully examined each one. "Every plant has a story," she said softly. "Every stream, every stone has a memory. You just have to be willing to notice it." John crouched beside her, feeling awkward yet eager. He watched her fingers move gently over the leaves, and for the first time, he began to see the forest through her eyes. It was alive, breathing, and patient. And somehow he realized it mirrored his own life, full of lessons if only he were willing to pay attention. They continued their walk for hours, and John noticed his own thoughts becoming quieter. The usual chatter of worry and stress had faded, replaced by a sense of wonder. Ayanna spoke of simple things: how to find safe water, how to recognize edible plants, how to read the tracks of animals, but her words were deeper than survival tips. They spoke of mindfulness, observation, and respect for all life. When they returned to the cabin, John felt tired but oddly refreshed. The sunlight had faded, leaving the forest bathed in the soft glow of dusk. "Thank you for showing me this," he said. "I didn't expect to meet anyone here, but I'm glad I did." Ayanna smiled again. "Sometimes the people who change your life are the ones you don't expect. Remember, John, the forest gives, but it also teaches. You have to listen." Her words stayed with him as he prepared dinner, a simple meal cooked over the small stove in the cabin. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of connection, not just to the forest, but to something larger than himself.
There was wisdom in what Ayanna had shown him, a calmness that seemed to settle in his chest like a warm ember.
That night, as John sat on the porch writing in his journal, he found himself reflecting on the encounter. He realized he had come to the cabin expecting peace, but what he had found was something more. Guidance. The presence of another human being, someone who understood the forest and life in ways he did not, had already begun to change him. He felt a quiet excitement, a feeling that his time here would be more meaningful than he had imagined. He tried to sleep, but the sounds of the forest were louder than usual. Every rustle of leaves, every bird call, every distant howl of an animal seemed amplified. Instead of fear, though, he felt curiosity. What else might he learn? Who else might he meet? The question stirred something in him, a sense that this retreat was only the beginning, not just of rest, but of transformation. The next morning, John woke with determination. He decided he would follow Ayana's guidance and spend the day exploring deeper parts of the forest. As he stepped outside, he saw her waiting near the edge of the cabin clearing, her eyes bright with the early sunlight. "Good morning," she said simply. "Ready to see what the forest has to show you today?" John nodded, feeling a nervous excitement. "Yes," he replied. "I'm ready." And so the two set off together, deeper into the woods than John had ever imagined. Each step brought new discoveries, hidden streams, unusual birds, ancient trees twisted into strange shapes, and patterns in the earth that told stories of the creatures who had passed through. Ayana explained each detail with patience and care, and John absorbed it all, feeling his mind open in ways it hadn't in years. By mid-afternoon, they reached a small waterfall tucked into a rocky hollow. Water tumbled over moss-covered stones, sparkling in the sunlight. Ayana knelt beside the water, cupping her hands to drink. "The water here is clean," she said. "It can refresh both body and spirit if you're willing to accept it." John knelt beside her, feeling the cool water on his hands, and for a moment all the tension of the city melted away. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the water, the wind, and the soft sounds of the forest. John felt a strange warmth in his chest, a combination of relief, awe, and connection. He realized that the solitude he had sought was no longer enough. He had discovered that guidance, kindness, and shared understanding could bring a deeper peace than he had ever imagined. As they returned to the cabin that evening, John felt changed, even if only slightly. The forest had begun to teach him, but so had Ayana. She had opened a door he didn't know existed, and he felt both grateful and curious about what lay beyond it. When he finally lay down to sleep that night, he felt a calm he hadn't known in years. His journey for peace had taken an unexpected turn, and he sensed that the days ahead would hold even greater revelations, lessons about life, about connection, and perhaps about love. And though he didn't know it yet, John's encounter with Ayana was the start of a story that would change his life forever. A story that began with a search for peace, but would lead him into a world he had never imagined. The next morning, John woke with a strange sense of purpose. The cabin felt different now, almost alive, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the lessons of the forest. He dressed quickly, feeling eager to explore more, and stepped outside. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees, casting long, shifting shadows on the forest floor. The quiet seemed deeper than ever, but it was not lonely. It was filled with life, both seen and unseen. Ayana was already waiting by the cabin, a calm presence among the trees. She nodded at him, her expression gentle but full of knowing. "Today I will show you more than just the paths and streams," she said. "You will see how the forest can teach about life itself if you pay attention." John felt a thrill of anticipation. The previous day had already opened his mind to things he had forgotten: patience, observation, quiet joy. But he sensed that today would go even deeper. He followed Ayana as they moved along a narrow trail, stepping carefully over roots and stones. Each step seemed to connect him more to the forest, as if the earth itself was welcoming him. They stopped beside a large tree, its trunk wide and gnarled with age. "This tree has stood here for over 100 years, Ayana said softly. "It has faced storms, fires, droughts, and still it grows. There is a lesson in its strength and patience." Life is like this tree. You cannot rush growth, and the challenges you face will shape you if you let them. John looked at the tree, tracing the deep grooves in its bark with his eyes. He thought of his own life, the years of stress, disappointment, and missed opportunities. Could he really learn to face those storms with the same quiet strength? Ayanna seemed to notice his thoughts. "Sometimes, John," she said, "the hardest lessons are the ones we do not want to learn. But the forest can show you if you are willing to listen." As they walked further, she pointed out plants and herbs, explaining not just their uses, but their place in the ecosystem. "Every living thing has a purpose," she said. "Even the smallest flower contributes to the balance of life. Humans often forget this. We think we are separate, but we are part of the same story as the trees, the animals, and the streams." John listened intently, trying to absorb her words. He had read about mindfulness in nature before, but hearing it from someone who had lived in these woods for years was different. There was a depth to her knowledge, a connection that went beyond books and theory. It felt alive, real, and personal. They came to a small clearing where sunlight poured through the canopy, illuminating a patch of wildflowers. Ayanna knelt and ran her fingers gently over the petals. "Notice the way each flower grows, reaching for the light," she said. "It does not compete with its neighbors. It simply grows in harmony. People can learn from this. Life is not a competition. It is a balance of giving, receiving, and growing at your own pace." John crouched beside her, feeling the soft petals against his fingers. He thought about his own life, the rush, the constant striving, the endless comparisons. Could he really find balance, like the flowers reaching for the sun without thought of each other? He wanted to believe it, and for the first time, he felt it might be possible. As the day passed, Ayanna led him to a small stream that wound through the forest. The water was clear, cold, and sparkling. She knelt by the edge, cupping her hands to drink, then gestured for John to do the same. "The water here is pure," she said. "It reminds us that life can be clear and refreshing if we let go of what clouds it: fear, anger, and regret." John drank, feeling the cool water fill him with energy. He closed his eyes and let the sound of the stream wash over him. It was as if the forest itself was speaking to him, teaching him how to release the burdens he had carried for years. They spent hours exploring the area around the stream. Ayanna showed him how to identify animal tracks, how to notice subtle changes in the weather, and how to read the language of the forest. Each lesson was practical, but also metaphorical. Every footprint, every leaf, every ripple in the water seemed to mirror lessons about life, patience, and awareness.
At one point, they came across a small hill covered in moss and ferns.
Ayanna sat down on a large rock and gestured for John to join her. "Sit," she said. "Close your eyes and listen." John obeyed, sitting cross-legged as he had seen her do. At first he heard only the familiar sounds of the forest, the birds, the rustling leaves, the distant trickle of water. Then, slowly, he began to notice smaller details: the hum of insects in the grass, the faint creaking of branches as they swayed in the wind, the rhythm of his own breathing mingling with the sounds around him. "This is what the forest teaches," Ayanna said softly. "Presence, awareness. To be here fully, without distraction or judgment. Many people spend their lives running, never noticing the simple truths that surround them." John felt a strange calm settle over him. He realized how much he had missed by rushing through life, always focused on the next task, the next goal, the next distraction. The forest had a rhythm, a pace that was steady and unhurried, and by following it, he began to feel a sense of inner balance. As the sun began to set, they made their way back to the cabin. John felt physically tired but emotionally alive. For the first time in years, he felt like he was learning something meaningful, something that would stay with him long after he left the mountains. He had come seeking peace, but he was discovering something even deeper: a connection to life, to nature, and to a wisdom that he had long ignored. That night, as he sat by the fireplace writing in his journal, John reflected on the lessons of the day. The forest had taught him patience, observation, and respect. But Ayana had shown him how those lessons could apply to his own life. He realized that peace was not just the absence of stress, it was the presence of understanding, acceptance, and harmony with the world around him. He wrote about the tree that had stood for over 100 years, about the flowers that grew without competition, about the stream that carried life quietly and consistently. Each lesson felt like a mirror, reflecting parts of himself he had forgotten or neglected. John thought about his own struggles, the failed relationships, the career pressures, the constant noise of the city. For the first time, he saw them clearly, without judgment or blame. They were part of his life's journey, shaping him like the storms and seasons shaped the forest. And just as the forest had its cycles, so did his life. He realized that he could face challenges with patience, grow through hardship, and find balance even amidst chaos. As he drifted to sleep that night, John felt a sense of hope he hadn't known in years. The forest had become a teacher, and Ayana its guide. He no longer felt like an outsider seeking peace. He felt like a student ready to learn, to grow, and to transform. Little did he know that the days ahead would deepen this journey even further. He had begun to understand the lessons of the land, but the forest still held secrets, and Ayana still had wisdom to share. Lessons that would challenge him, inspire him, and ultimately change the way he saw himself and the world around him. John's retreat, which had begun as an escape from stress and solitude, was becoming a profound journey of self-discovery. With each step into the forest, with each lesson from Ayana, he felt the weight of his past lighten. He was learning not just to survive, but to live fully, to be present, and to embrace the simple, enduring truths that nature and human connection could offer. By the end of the third day, John understood that his time at the cabin was not just a temporary break from life. It was a beginning of transformation, a journey toward understanding, and an opportunity to rediscover parts of himself that he had long forgotten. And in the quiet moments between lessons, he couldn't help but feel a growing respect and admiration for Ayana, the woman who had guided him to this point, whose knowledge and presence were slowly reshaping the path of his life. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the faint scent of pine and wildflowers. John Matthews woke feeling restless, though in a different way than before. The lessons of the forest had begun to settle in his mind, yet he felt an undercurrent of emotions he had been avoiding for years. Guilt, regret, and old grief surfaced like shadows he could no longer ignore. He realized that the peace he had sought in solitude would not come until he faced these truths. He dressed quickly and stepped outside. The sun was climbing slowly over the trees, casting long golden beams that cut through the morning mist. Ayana was already waiting by the cabin, her presence calm and steady, yet John noticed an intensity in her gaze today. It was as if she could sense the turmoil stirring inside him. "Good morning, John," she said softly, her voice warm but deliberate. "Are you ready to go deeper today?" John nodded, swallowing a lump in his throat. "I think I'm ready to face some things," he admitted. He did not elaborate, but the words themselves felt heavy with meaning. They walked along a familiar trail at first, but soon Ayana led him to a narrow path he had not seen before. The forest here felt older, wilder, as if it had been untouched for centuries. The sunlight was dimmer, filtered through thick branches, and the air carried a sense of quiet mystery. John felt both nervous and eager. They reached a clearing where a small stone circle had been formed long ago. Moss covered the edges of the stones, and small ferns grew in the cracks. Ayana gestured for him to sit in the center. "This is a place for reflection," she explained. "Here, the forest helps you see yourself clearly. You must confront the parts of your life you have avoided. Only then can you grow." John sank to the ground, feeling the cool earth beneath him. His mind swirled with memories he had tried to suppress, arguments with his ex-wife, years of overworking, moments he wished he could undo. The guilt and regret that had been tucked away for so long now demanded attention. He felt exposed, vulnerable, and unsure if he could face it. Ayana sat quietly beside him, not speaking, only observing. Her presence was grounding. John realized that he could not hide from her understanding. Finally, he took a deep breath and began to speak, his voice shaking. I've made so many mistakes, he said. I ignored the people I cared about. I spent years chasing success, but I lost myself in the process. My marriage, I failed. My friendships, I neglected them. And now I feel empty, even when I try to enjoy simple things. I don't know how to fix it. Ayana listened without interruption. Her eyes held compassion, but they also held a quiet challenge, as if she were urging him to face the truth fully. John, she said finally, her voice gentle, you cannot change the past, but you can learn from it. The pain you feel is a signal, not a punishment. It is telling you that you need to understand yourself, forgive yourself, and move forward. Her words struck him deeply. For the first time, he realized that he had been punishing himself for years. The forest had shown him how to be patient, how to observe, and how to find harmony with life. But now he understood that true peace required forgiveness, not just of others, but of himself. They sat in silence for a long time. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for John to absorb the lesson. Finally, Ayana spoke again. Walk with me, she said, standing. John followed her through the clearing and down a narrow path that led to a small stream. The water flowed over smooth stones, reflecting the sunlight in sparkling patterns. Ayana knelt beside the stream and cupped her hands, drinking and then offering him some. The stream flows, she said. It does not hold on to the past. It does not fight against the rocks in its path. It simply moves forward. You can be like the stream, John. You can face your regrets, learn from them, and keep moving. The past does not define you unless you let it. John took the water, feeling its coolness on his lips. Her metaphor resonated deeply, and he closed his eyes, imagining his mistakes and regrets being carried away like leaves floating downstream. He felt a strange sense of relief, though the process was not easy. His heart still ached, but for the first time, it was not a pain he wanted to bury. It was a pain he could learn from. They continued along the stream, stopping occasionally as Ayana pointed out subtle patterns in nature. A broken branch showed where a storm had passed, yet new growth emerged nearby. A tree scarred by lightning continued to thrive. Each lesson of the forest mirrored his own struggles. Life was not about perfection. It was about resilience, growth, and learning to adapt. As they walked, John shared more of his story. He spoke of the loneliness he had felt in his career, the disappointment of failed relationships, and the pressure to meet expectations he no longer wanted. Ayana listened without judgment, occasionally nodding, sometimes offering a gentle insight that cut to the heart of the matter.
You carry too much alone, she said at one point.
You think you must face everything by yourself, but life is meant to be shared. Connection heals, just as solitude teaches. You need both. Her words struck a chord. John realized that his retreat to the cabin, while necessary, had been only the first step. He had isolated himself from the world to find peace, but true healing required openness, trust, and connection. The presence of Ayana, her guidance and understanding, was teaching him what solitude alone never could. By late afternoon, they reached a high ridge overlooking the forest below. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills, sparkling streams, and distant mountains stretching into the horizon. Ayana motioned for him to sit beside her. Look at the forest, John. Notice the layers, the patterns, the cycles. Life is the same. Every challenge, every mistake, every joy, every sorrow, they all form the landscape of your life. You cannot erase them, but you can see the beauty in the whole. John gazed out over the forest, feeling the truth of her words. He thought of his own life, the mistakes, the heartbreaks, the lost time, but also the lessons, the moments of joy, and the growth he had achieved. For the first time, he felt a sense of acceptance, a feeling that he could live with the past without being defined by it. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, John turned to Ayana. Thank you, he said softly. I've never felt this clarity before. I feel like I understand myself in a way I never did.
Ayana smiled, placing a hand lightly on his shoulder. You are learning, John.
Healing is not instant, and it is not always easy, but you are willing to face yourself. That is the most important step. They returned to the cabin as night fell. The forest was quiet. The only sounds the occasional rustle of leaves and distant calls of nocturnal animals. John prepared a simple meal, but he could barely focus on eating. His mind was alive with reflection, gratitude, and a newfound sense of direction. Later, he sat by the fireplace with his journal, writing down the lessons of the day. He wrote about forgiveness, resilience, and acceptance. He wrote about the stream, the broken branches, and the cycles of the forest. Most of all, he wrote about Ayanna, her wisdom, her presence, and the way she had helped him confront truths he had long avoided. As he lay in bed that night, John felt a quiet strength growing within him. The pain of the past was still there, but it no longer weighed him down in the same way. He understood that healing was a journey, not a destination. And he knew that the guidance of someone who truly understood the balance of life, someone like Ayanna, was a rare gift, one that could change the course of his life forever. In the stillness of the night, John realized that he had come to the cabin seeking peace, but he had found so much more. He had found clarity, understanding, and the courage to face himself. And though he did not yet know what the future held, he felt ready to embrace it, with all its challenges, lessons, and possibilities. The forest had shown him patience. Ayanna had shown him courage. And together they had opened a door inside John that he had long thought closed forever. The morning sun rose gently over the mountains, painting the forest in warm hues of gold and green. John Matthews woke with a sense of calm he had never known before. The cabin no longer felt like a temporary escape. It had become a place of transformation. The days he had spent walking with Ayanna, observing the forest and confronting his own past, had changed something inside him. He could feel it deep in his chest, a steady, quiet confidence, the kind that comes from understanding oneself and the world around you. John stepped outside, inhaling the crisp morning air. The forest was alive with sound, the chirping of birds, the rustling leaves, and the faint murmur of a distant stream. For the first time in years, he did not feel the weight of the city pressing on his shoulders. He felt fully present, fully alive, and fully aware of the beauty surrounding him. The lessons of patience, observation, and resilience had taken root, and he could feel them growing within him like the strong roots of the ancient trees. Ayanna was waiting by the edge of the clearing, as she had each morning. But today there was a softness in her expression, a quiet joy that mirrored John's own feelings. "Good morning, John," she said. "Today is different. Can you feel it?" John nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "Yes," he said. "I can feel everything. I feel ready." They walked together along a trail that led deeper into the forest than John had ventured before. The path was narrow, winding, and filled with small surprises. Hidden pools, clusters of wildflowers, and patches of sunlight breaking through the canopy. As they walked, Ayanna spoke, but her words were few. This time the forest itself seemed to be teaching, and John was fully attentive, absorbing every detail, every sound, every shift in the air. They reached a small hill that overlooked a valley filled with trees, streams, and distant mountains. Ayanna sat on a large rock, patting the space beside her for John. He joined her, taking in the breathtaking view. The valley stretched endlessly, a patchwork of green and gold, with sunlight dancing on the leaves. It was a scene of perfect harmony, a balance of life that seemed almost untouched by time. "Look at it, John," Ayanna said softly. "Every tree, every stream, every stone has a place. The forest thrives because each part plays its role. Life is the same. You are a part of it, and you have a place in it too." John felt tears welling in his eyes. He had spent so many years feeling lost, disconnected, and uncertain of his place in the world. Now, with the lessons of the forest and the guidance of Ayanna, he felt rooted. He understood that his past, with all its mistakes and regrets, had shaped him, but it did not define him. He could grow, adapt, and contribute to the world in his own way. just as each element of the forest played its part in creating balance and harmony. Ayana reached over and gently touched his arm. "You have changed," she said, "not just because of what you have learned here, but because you were willing to face yourself. That courage will guide you far beyond this forest." John smiled, feeling a warmth that went beyond the sunlight. "I never thought I could feel like this," he admitted. "I came here looking for peace, but I feel alive and full of hope. I feel like I can finally move forward." They remained on the hill for a long time, watching the sun rise higher, illuminating every detail of the valley below. John reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first day, when he arrived at the cabin weary and anxious, seeking only to escape the chaos of his life. He remembered meeting Ayana, feeling a mixture of curiosity and caution, and how her presence gradually drew him into the forest, into learning, and into self-reflection. He remembered confronting the pain of his past, the mistakes and regrets that had weighed him down for so long. And now he felt transformed, renewed, and ready to embrace the future. As the afternoon approached, they returned to the cabin. John worked alongside Ayana, gathering firewood, tidying the space, and preparing a simple meal. Their conversation was easy, filled with laughter, shared observations, and quiet moments of reflection. The companionship he had found in her presence was comforting and inspiring. He realized that true peace was not just found in solitude. It was found in connection, in understanding, and in shared experiences that nurtured growth. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, John sat on the porch with Ayana. They watched the forest transform in the fading light, shadows stretching across the clearing, and the air growing cooler. John felt a profound gratitude for this place, for the lessons it had taught him, and for the woman who had guided him with patience and wisdom.
"Ayana," he said softly, "I don't think I would have discovered any of this without you."
"You've changed my life truly." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sunset. "You changed your own life, John. I only helped you see what was already inside you. Courage, patience, and hope. They were always there. You just had to face yourself to find them." John nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He realized that his journey at the cabin had been more than an escape. It had been a process of awakening, a discovery of strength, clarity, and purpose. He had come looking for peace, but he had found much more: a sense of direction, a deeper understanding of life, and a connection that reminded him of the value of human relationships and the beauty of the natural world. As night fell, John lit the fireplace and sat with his journal. He wrote about the forest, the lessons, and the moments of transformation. He wrote about Ayana not just as a guide, but as someone who had helped him rediscover himself. Each word felt like a bridge between the man he had been and the man he was becoming. That night, as he lay in bed, John reflected on everything he had experienced. The fear, the uncertainty, the confrontation with his past, and the quiet lessons of the forest had all led him to this moment. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, a recognition of the journey, and an openness to whatever came next. He understood that life would continue to have challenges, but he now had the tools, the perspective, and the courage to face them with balance and grace. The following morning, John prepared to leave the cabin. His heart was full, yet he felt a calm certainty about the path ahead. He walked to the edge of the clearing one last time, taking in the forest, the streams, and the mountains stretching endlessly before him. Each tree, each leaf, each sound carried the lessons he had learned: the resilience of life, the importance of patience, and the necessity of connection. Ayana stood beside him, offering a warm smile. "Are you ready?" she asked. John nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes. I'm ready to return to my life, but I will carry this place, these lessons, and your guidance with me always." They walked back to the cabin, gathered his belongings, and shared a quiet moment of farewell. John felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness, knowing that leaving the forest also meant leaving the daily presence of Ayana, whose wisdom had become so integral to his transformation. Yet he also felt hope, knowing that the lessons and the connection would remain with him forever. As John drove away from the cabin, the mountains gradually receding in his rearview mirror, He reflected on the journey. He had come seeking peace, thinking it could be found in solitude and isolation. Instead, he had discovered that peace was intertwined with self-understanding, courage, and meaningful connection. The encounter with Ayana had not only guided him through the forest but through the depths of his own heart, teaching him to embrace life fully, with both its joys and its challenges. By the time he reached the city, John felt transformed. The noise, the traffic, and the responsibilities of daily life no longer felt oppressive. He had learned to carry the calm of the forest within him, the lessons of patience, balance, and resilience shaping the way he approached every situation. He felt lighter, stronger, and more aware, ready to navigate life with a sense of purpose and understanding he had never known before. In the weeks and months that followed, John applied the lessons he had learned. He approached his work with clarity and focus, balanced with moments of reflection and mindfulness. He nurtured relationships that he had neglected, reaching out with sincerity and openness. And though the forest was far away, he carried its lessons in his heart, remembering the quiet streams, the ancient trees, and the gentle guidance of Ayana, whose presence had forever changed the course of his life. John often thought of the cabin, the mountains, and the forest, realizing that the true transformation had not happened in the physical retreat, but within himself. He had found courage, acceptance, and hope. He had discovered the strength to face his past, the wisdom to live in the present, and the openness to embrace the future. What had begun as a search for peace had become a journey of self-discovery, healing, and profound personal growth. And though he returned to the world he had once thought overwhelming, John knew he had been forever changed. The forest, the lessons, and the woman who had guided him, Ayana, would remain with him always, a source of inspiration, strength, and enduring peace. The cabin that had promised solitude had given him far more, a new beginning, a renewed sense of purpose, and the knowledge that life, when faced with courage and awareness, could be full, meaningful, and truly extraordinary.